I'm Dick Thornburgh. I've spent most of my career enforcing the law of the land. A non-discriminatory workplace free of sexual harassment is the law of the land. Title VII of the Civil Rights Act of 1964. That law has been augmented and toughened by Congress, tested in litigation, and upheld by the Supreme Court of the United States. Individual states enforce their own laws as well. Conduct that violates the law, the rights of co-workers, or the anti-discrimination policies of an organization will have serious consequences. A warning, especially of bad times to come, is sometimes referred to as the handwriting on the wall. A very different kind of handwriting on the wall figured in a major sexual harassment case as evidence. Sexually explicit graffiti was discovered in a men's room stall at EXT Corporation. It was alleged to be retaliation, directed at an employee who had complained about sexual harassment. Under court order, a piece of the wall was removed to preserve the graffiti as evidence. The case had started small. It was growing fast. With sexual harassment cases that reach this stage, the consequences can include huge civil damages, wrecked careers, ruined homes, and reputations publicly dragged through the mud. Before a case like this is over, employees who perpetrate harassment and their employers will find that juries and judges, government regulators, the media, and the court of public opinion are more than ready to throw the book at sexual harassment. In the EXT case, a complaint snowballed into accusations against a number of hourly, salaried, and supervisory people, all men harassing women in this instance, although women have been charged with sexual harassment in other cases, and some courts have upheld same-sex harassment allegations. Let me assure you, there's nothing in the complaints and consequences you're going to hear about that hasn't happened in hundreds of actual cases. As you look at the workers accused of sexual harassment at EXT, don't expect to find monsters. Eddie, Chet, Paul, Frank, and the others are people whose lives revolved about working and paying their bills, raising the kids, trying to enjoy some good times and steer clear of bad ones. But as of one Tuesday in March, their lives began to revolve around something very different. On that Tuesday after lunch break, one of their co-workers, Carol Burton, asked to speak with her supervisor, Ted Russell, in private. She complained that men in her area persisted in making off-color jokes to her and about her.
What I told Russ was, some of it was rude, some of it was really gross. I tried to get them to cut it out, but it didn't stop. In fact, the wisecracks even got worse. I told Russ that the leader of the pack was Eddie, and he told me that if Eddie weren't such a good worker, he'd fire his butt out of here. But instead, he said, "I'll kick his butt for you." I saw him call Eddie in, and later he told me that he disciplined him.
I told Carol, I gave Eddie a good one. He'll be sitting on pillows for a month. Eddie asked, what do you want me to do? I told him, I want you to do what your mother taught you to do. Mind your manners. Watch your mouth when there are ladies present. Keep your hands to yourself. And when you do something wrong, like now, say you're sorry. You hear me? Apologize, or you're out of here. That's what I told her.
Russ didn't make a big deal out of it. He said, you're a good worker. I don't want to give you a bad time. But he said the manual said you have to apologize to the woman. So just do it. You know, try to smooth things over. So I said, what do you want us to kiss and make up? And he said, yeah. So I did. I told her, Carol, I promise you'll never hear anything like that out of our mouths again.
Carol didn't hear much of anything else out of their mouths either. No jokes, no small talk, the silent treatment aimed at her and other women. When they objected to that, Eddie and the others called them troublemakers and went back to their old ways and worse. Whistles, gestures, remarks, now followed by mock apologies.
Once in a while, something would slip out. But anytime that happened, I would always say, I'm sorry. I didn't know there was a lady present. I hope I didn't embarrass you.
Carol complained again. Her friend Rita backed her up. This time, Eddie and the others were pulled into a closed-door meeting. Later, Russell reported he had lowered the boom.
My memo about the meeting said, if they didn't get it before, they get it now, because I gave it to them good. We have a good record for the files. I got signed statements from all of them saying they understand our harassment policy and they will comply with it. I followed up with the complainant. She's satisfied her problem is resolved.
After that, things seemed to get better. Then Carol learned the harassment had simply gone behind closed doors. A friend on the nighttime cleaning crew gave Carol a snapshot of a wall in the first floor men's room.
Hi, Carol, let me show you something. This is gonna make you so mad. I took this picture last night. See that writing on the wall?
Yeah.
It's your phone number.
You sure? It's kind of fuzzy. I can't really make it out.
That's what I was afraid of. So I wrote down what it says. It was the only paper handy. But that writing's new. It's gross. It's about you. It started the middle of last week, and every day someone adds to it. I thought Russell said he was going to put an end to this.
Russell's not going to do anything. He's giving me the runaround.
The next day, Carol contacted a law firm. Her lawyers, Judith Miller and Martin Finn, examined her evidence.
Well, according to your friend, it says, want to score? Try
262-7264, my phone number.
Your friend says some person or persons keeps listing sexual acts and then rating your performance from 1 to 10.
Yeah, I started getting really weird telephone calls on my answering machine last week. Now I know why. Here's the tape.
Wow. It looks like you have ample cause for a harassment case. That's one legal issue. And this may be defamation, slander.
With malice, which means in addition to your complaint against the company, you could go after whoever wrote this. They have assets, homes, cars, savings. Their pay can be garnished.
Defamation is a strong possible issue for you. Now, over the phone, you said one of them touched you with a tool
Chet,
or a...
he's got this little gag he likes to play with his staple gun. Finally, I had it. I blew up at him. He wouldn't stop. I should go back and say that the very first time it happened, I laughed. It struck me as funny. I don't know why. Is that going to kill the case?
Not at all. He was touching you. You told him to stop. He didn't. You could go after him for assault.
You go after sexual harassment with someone like that, their defense will be it was one isolated incident.
Chet does that with lots of women.
They'll say it was one rogue employee violating company rules.
Not just one. There are other guys Chet has doing the same kind of stuff. There are several friends of mine who also complained. Nothing happened, so they quit.
All right. We have a group, maybe a large group of potential complainants, some of whom lost jobs as a result of harassment.
There could be dozens with complaints about, 5, maybe 6 men or more.
The more people we bring in, the stronger the case for abusive and hostile work environment.
We have to show a pervasive pattern of humiliating, offensive, unwelcome behavior, creating a discriminatory, sexually charged atmosphere as a condition of employment. We'll need evidence, testimony, eyewitnesses.
We can get it.
Carol, before we go forward with this, you're sure you don't want to work this out through your in-house complaint process?
I tried that twice. Others complained. Where did it get us?
Carol, right up front, you need to know. These things can drag on for a long time. You may not win. Even if you do, there's a cap on damages under federal law. There's no cap under state law, but you might not win there. Bottom line, there's no guarantee anyone's going to get rich.
I don't care about getting rich. I just don't want to have to work in a sexual war zone in order to hold on to my job.
You're on. We'll need to file with the EEOC.
From that moment, the conduct being complained about would no longer be treated simply as personally objectionable, but also as legally actionable, as violations of the law of the land. The complaint was filed. Lawyers and a carpenter appeared unannounced at EXT visitor reception with a subpoena to seize a piece of evidence that might be at risk, the writing on the men's room wall. The graffiti was sliced out of the wall for removal from the building. Later, there would be court orders to discover other evidence, including payroll records, personnel files, disciplinary reports, policy and training manuals. Carol contacted women she had worked with. Word spread. People phoned in from other parts of the company. The law firm used payroll records to contact former employees. At meetings of complainants, more people showed up than were expected. All had stories. Most were actionable. As the case grew, the alleged harassers were being confronted on all sides. EXT's internal auditor investigated reported violations of anti-discrimination policy, interviewed witnesses, and reviewed personnel files and records of disciplinary action. An independent complaint was filed on behalf of a number of employees seeking to investigate other rights violations. Allegations of harassment were uncovered in other departments, like the saleswoman who said her boss had penalized her because she refused to play along with sexual propositions from an important customer. Television and newspapers picked up Carol's story with details of the alleged harassment.
One complaint says that you turned the workplace into a sexual war zone. Do you have any comment?
I have no comment at all, okay?
Eddie, can everyone comment for the morning
But
paper,
Eddie, a
please?
letter to the newspaper called you and your fellow employees perverts.
Eddie,
Do you plan to respond?
No, I have no comment.
Eddie, just one quote for the paper for tomorrow, please.
One
Hey, here's a
response.
quote for the paper. Would you get off my property? Just get off my property now.
I heard they were running a story with my name in it, so I call home. Honey, I'll be home early. We got something to talk about. I get home, open the door, whack! She throws a newspaper at my head. Is this what we have to talk about? I don't know how you put
The publicity rubbed off on everyone. Private lives became public property.
So the other guys, it's supposed to be on my side, right? Somebody writes a letter to the editor of the paper, calling us perverts, right? So the guys think this is really funny. All the ones who weren't accused of anything. Of course. So Mike starts giving me the business. He says, "Gee, Eddie, I'd like to be there when you have to tell your kids. Let me say this, kids, Daddy is not a pervert."
Mike's a big mouth.
Yeah, always. And he won't let it go, right? He keeps up with it. He says, "Yeah, and your kids are all standing there looking at you saying, 'Daddy, what's a pervert?'" And the guys are all laughing like it's the funniest thing they ever heard.
Despite Supervisor Russell's claims that he had lowered the boom, the harassment hadn't stopped. Depositions under oath showed that even in that closed-door meeting with all the men in the department, nobody took sexual harassment seriously.
I recall just before lunch break, Russ brought a bunch of us in, closed the door, and laid out the woman's grievance. But it didn't seem like Russ wanted to make a big deal out of it. At one point, he said, "I know you guys think they're making a mountain out of a molehill. As a matter of fact, so do I."
I hit them with some of the things that they had been saying and doing that got the woman upset. Like how Carol didn't appreciate Eddie's idea of humor.
I said, "Hey, Eddie, is that all you said to her? Doesn't sound so bad to me."
I told him it did to her, Chet. Doesn't matter what it sounded like to Eddie.
I said, "Russ, that's Eddie's idea of a compliment."
I said if she thinks that's bad, she ought to hear what I call some of the guys.
I told him she does hear, and she doesn't like that either. Neither do Rita nor some of the others.
I said, "I don't get Rita making a stink about Eddie's jokes. She used to laugh at him louder than anyone. Well, except Eddie, of course."
I came back at him with, "She's not laughing now."
I said you can't even be yourself anymore. It's like with these ditzes around, you have to watch every word you say at all times. You have to carry around your PC pocket guide like some tourist phrase book. Check every word you're going to say before you dare open your mouth.
I told him it was not just off-color talk. There were complaints about touching and physical horsing around. Like I told Chet, you keep that staple gun on your bench. From now on, around here, you don't touch a female with a 6-foot pole.
Somebody said something like, get yourself a 7-foot pole, Chet. And then Eddie yells out, get yourself a 10-foot. That'll give him something to scream about.
They were a bunch of jokers, but I thought I finally got the message across. I had them sign this form that said we had the meeting and they understood the rules. I have it on file. Then I hit them with, don't give us any more trouble. If you guys bring the EEOC climbing all over us, you are out of here.
What I remember he said was, when you go out of here, would you make sure to wipe those smiles off your faces? Make this look like it's serious business? Which it obviously wasn't.
Two days later, someone got down to the serious business of retaliation. Carol's phone number and sexual scoreboard appeared on the wall of the men's room. To find out who was responsible, handwriting samples were collected at EXT and sent to a forensic handwriting expert for laboratory comparison with the graffiti on the wall. The electronic signature of the voice that called rude messages to Carol's answering machine was matched to tapes recorded at EXT. The caller and the graffiti writer were identified as the same person.
The graffiti was written at different times. One day Carol gets a score of 5.6 with this juicy comment here. The next day she gets this 7.8. Different marker, same hand. Then there's a 10, 10, another 10.
Can you prove this woman didn't sneak into the men's room and give herself straight 10s?
We can prove that the wall and this handwriting are a match. So are the voice signatures. It's your client here. You want to show these to a jury and ask them what they think of Eddie? Testimony about what really went on at the meeting and how that led to the graffiti and other forms of retaliation ended any attempt at a defense.
EXT agreed to pay major compensatory and punitive damages and to improve its program to make the workplace free of sexual harassment.
The case had serious consequences for the harassers themselves. Eddie's demeaning remarks and jokes were found to be hostile to women in the workplace. Further, he was found to have retaliated against Carol Burton for her complaint. He was terminated and has relocated to another town looking for new employment. Carol Burton has filed suit against him for slander and defamation. Chet's persistent physical contact with women and his pranks directed at women were found to create a hostile and threatening work environment. He was terminated. Assault and battery charges are pending. He and his wife have separated. Supervisor Ted Russell winked at sexual harassment and failed to investigate, discipline, or follow up as required in the policy manual. He reported inaccurately on his handling of the complaints by Carol Burton and others. He was demoted to a non-supervisory position and has since left the organization. The case prompted investigations into other alleged harassers.
Paul, for one, had a history of getting drunk at company-sponsored social events and aggressively trying to get women co-workers to engage in sexual horseplay and banter. He was suspended during peer review, and after a series of hearings, he was terminated. Frank downloaded sexual jokes and cartoons from a website and circulated them to embarrass women in the office. He was put on probation, removed from internet access, and required to write an apology to several co-workers. Office use of the internet and email are now restricted and monitored.
Bill was found to have condoned quid pro quo sexual harassment. One of his female account representatives repeatedly rejected sexual propositions from the buyer for a major customer. The buyer offered to increase purchases and pay higher margins if the account rep treated him right. If she didn't, he would take his account elsewhere. The rep complained to her boss, Bill, who made no attempt to stop the customer's behavior. Instead, he told his rep that her bonus and her job depended on, quote, making sure this guy goes to sleep at night with a smile on his face, unquote. Bill was suspended and ultimately terminated. The other company's buyer was terminated by his employer for violating both conflict of interest and sexual harassment policies.
Organizations responding to cases like EXT are sending a message to all hands. This management has zero tolerance for sexual conduct on the job. We will not tolerate behavior that violates the law, organization policy, terms of employment, and normal standards of conduct. Sexual harassment is taken very seriously. Discipline and dismissals go all the way to the top. In recent cases, even CEOs, partners, general managers, and other top executives have been investigated, sued, fined, and fired because they sexually harassed employees or tolerated sexual harassment. People still ask, what is sexual harassment? Sexual harassment is unwelcome sexual conduct on the job. On this subject, the laws are gender blind. Quid pro quo is one form of sexual harassment. For example, if the message is, if you want a job or higher compensation from me, I want something sexual from you. The more pervasive form of sexual harassment today is called hostile work environment, unwelcome sexual behavior that creates an offensive, intimidating, or hostile atmosphere in the workplace. What kind of behavior may be unwelcome? Sexual talk, jokes, gestures, sexual pranks or physical contact, insults, innuendos, personal remarks based on gender, soliciting sexual encounters, displaying sexual photos, art, slogans. The offender may not mean to offend. That's no defense. If sexual conduct is objectionable to the person it's directed at or to others in the workplace, and it adversely affects the conditions under which that person works, and it persists despite that person's objections, it crosses the line between ill-mannered and illegal. Any complaint about that kind of behavior on the job is the handwriting on the wall. If it's your wall, be warned. Conduct in your workplace that violates the rights of coworkers, the policies of your organization, or the laws of the land will have serious consequences. Your organization, and all of you who work for it, may, one way or another, get the book thrown at you.